My name is Bryce Gaton, and I'm the founder of EV Choice, as well as being an EV writer commentator for The Driven. Mind you, many of you here may know me better for my regular EV articles in Renew magazine. I'm joining you today, by the way, from the land of the Bunurong people, and I'd like to extend my respect to the Bunurong elders, past, present, and emerging, as well as to all First Nation people who may be here joining us today. Before we start, Renew would like to thank the sponsors who've made this day possible. Couldn't do it without them. Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, Nathers, Your Home, Design for Place, Bank Australia, Sonnen, HIP versus Hype, Design Matters National, and Lighthouse Architecture and Science. Today, I'm excited to be joined by a great selection of guests. First, we have EV enthusiast, owner, former board president of Renew, and current treasurer of the board of the Environment Victoria, Ralf. We're also joined by Anthony, whose name I shall completely mangle if I try to pronounce, so I'll let Anthony sort that one. My apologies, Anthony. He is, however, the co-founder and director of Tassie-based organisation, The Good Car Company, who are working hard to create a second-hand EV market here through importing second-hand EVs and organising community bulk buys. Finally, I'd like to introduce Kay Wennegel. Kay has previously hosted a number of programs on 3RRR, including the weekly Science and Solutions Half Hour. She has owned an EV for some years now, in fact, many years now, and test-driven many more, and knows lots about the background to EVs. Thanks to both our panelists and you, the audience, for being here today. So let's get started. I'm going to start with a very quick guide to EV terminology, and the reason for that is we have, and I'll give you my numbers here, we have about 80,000 EVs in Australia at the moment, which makes up less than 1/2% of Australia's car park. So to 99.6% of EV or car owners out there, you're probably not as familiar as perhaps you could be about the terminology about EVs. So I'll quickly share just 3 slides just explaining some of the technology. And of course, I've managed to wipe that out. Here we go. And share that. And do that there. How's that, everybody? Can you see that? It's a quick one about what is an EV. We have the battery electric vehicles, which we'll be talking mainly about today. They're pure battery, which run basically the car, and you recharge them at a power point or whatever charging method you use. You have the plug-in hybrids, which overseas have becoming, in mature markets, actually starting to fade away and now regarded as an interim technology, but they will be allowed to be sold after the bans overseas when they happen on internal combustion engine cars. The HEV, which is like the Prius and the Corollas or Camrys and things around at the moment, they actually don't fail, or they fail at the first hurdle when these bans come in because they're regarded as a petrol car. And the fourth one that we probably won't talk about today is the hydrogen or fuel cell electric car. And the reason for that is pretty much all the pundits have now said that they're pretty much stillborn for the cars. Whether they make it for trucks or not is another matter, but for cars, it's pretty much accepted now they won't happen. EVSE, or a car charger, you have a number of sorts as opposed to what used to be for a petrol bowser, you just plug it in and fill. We have our portable ones for a power point or a 3-phase outlet, a couple there. You have your hardwired ones that we'll talk about too, and they're for home use. They may either be tethered with a lead like that Tesla, or a socket one that councils and things like that don't have to look after the lead. And the third one is these big chargers on the right, and you'll see those on the highway, and they'll charge, for my Kona, for instance, up to 50 times faster than my Kona will charge at home, or in fact 100 times faster than some of the import Leafs from Japan. So they are super fast. Not many cars and not many chargers can do that yet, but that's coming. And last but not least, the plug war. I'm often asked, what's this about plugs and better delay buying a car because the plugs aren't settled? They are. That is the system that was in the current Leaf, and only Nissan, Toyota, and Mitsubishi still use that one, and Nissan and Toyota are both giving up on it soon outside of Japan. And Mitsubishi don't sell battery electric cars yet or anymore. That's the plug that won, the CCS combined charging system, and all 230-volt 3-phase systems use that one now, and that includes Tesla for the Models 3 and Y. The only exception is those, which are the imports from Japan, and they use the CHAdeMO still, which is good if you DC charging because you don't get a lot of competition for the chargers. The other one is the slightly different AC port. You just need to buy an adapter, and all is well there. So hopefully that's got you up to speed quickly on some of the technology. And now we'll get back to the panel and see what is happening. Okay, where are we going? I'll just move that out of the way so I can check where I'm at. Moving right along. Okay, the panel. Okay. This background of how EVs fit into people's lives, I'll get the panel to tell us a bit about the EV journey, and that's probably an intended pun there. I'll start with you, Kay. Could you briefly introduce yourself and give a brief description of your EV ownership journey, and maybe a bit about the one you currently own, how long you've had it, how many kilometres a day, week, whatever you do. Do you live in a city or regional? What other cars maybe you've driven have you liked in comparison to yours? Yes, welcome, Kay.
Thanks very much, Bryce. Yes, I'm Kay Wennegel, and I've got an engineering background. That's why I'm interested in EVs. And I'm also passionate about working on climate change solutions. I live in the inner Melbourne suburb of Hawthorn in Wurundjeri people's land, and I bought my first and only electric car about 8 years ago, nearly 8 years ago. It's a first generation BMW i3, which now has a range of about 130 kilometres, used to be closer to 150, 160. I probably do about 150 or 160 kilometres a week. So, and it's mostly around the city. I don't do a lot of country driving. And so it's perfect for my needs. I have driven a lot of other electric cars because I was doing a radio show, as Bryce talked about, on 3CR. And I did a regular electric vehicle segment on that. So I've driven all the newer ones, and including the most recent one, which I took up to fully charged in Sydney this week or last weekend. And that was an Ioniq 5 and had a range of about 450 kilometres. So I only actually had to stop once to charge the car to get to Sydney, which was quite a different experience to my car. So that pretty much sums that up.
Oh, thank you very much, Kay. Ralf, can you tell us a little bit about what EV you've got, how long you've had it, where you live and how you charge it?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Ralf. I have been the president of Renew when it used to be ATA a long time ago, and I see myself as an early adopter of sustainable solutions. So putting on solar hot water systems in 2000, getting a solar PV system when there was still a very high feed-in tariff. And we also decided to get an EV at an early stage. In 2012, we happened to sit in a Tesla Model S in America when that was first released. That was very lucky. And my wife and I were convinced from that point on that we need to get an EV as soon as possible. And then in 2014, we bought a Holden Volt, not the Bolt, the current Bolt, but a Bolt with a V. That is an electric car with a petrol range extender. So it had an electric range of 70 Ks. And if you drove further, then the petrol motor would kick in. So we've driven that for 5 years. And in 2019, we got one of the first Tesla Model 3s that came to Australia. So we've been driving that for 3.5 years. We live on a 30-acre farm in Woodend or near Woodend in Victoria. And the last 1.5 Ks are dirt road, and it's a pretty bad road. So we probably have the dirtiest Model 3 in Australia for sure. It's always covered in dust, and there's no point in cleaning it. But we love it, and we drive. So far, we've driven 70,000 Ks, so that's about 380 Ks per week. We charge it at home overnight, and yeah. Well, did I miss any of the many questions?
No, that's fine. It was a quick one. Actually, I should get you to give a quick plug about the EV day up in Malmesbury. Is it the?
Oh, that's right. Yes. I work with a number of non-for-profit organizations. One of them is the Messrs Rangers Sustainability Group, and we're organizing an EV event, an EV expo in Malmesbury. That's halfway up to Bendigo for everyone who comes from Melbourne. And the Messrs Rangers Winter Arts Festival is on as well, so you could maybe make a weekend out of it. So it's on the 15th of April, and we also take people on for a ride in electric cars, so that might be a good experience.
Yeah, good. And you booked me to do a talk up there. So if people want to learn more about EVs than perhaps what's covered today, that will be one of the talks that I'll be at in the next few months. So yes, look it up on the web. Okay, Anthony, care to briefly introduce yourself and the Good Car Company and a bit about your EV journey in life?
Yeah, great. Hi, I'm Anthony. I'm joining you from Lutruwita, from down Tasmania. I'm in Nipaluna, Hobart, the land of the Palawa people. I am, gosh, my EV journey started many years ago, but in the last 4 years, I guess it's been an in total encompassing of everything in my life. We started the Good Car Company, the 2019 election, realizing there was going to be another 3 more years of climate failure. And we were looking at emissions rising in Tasmania, transport being the area where it was rising the fastest. And we just thought, oh gosh, what are we going to do? So we thought we were going to convert some cars and realized, gosh, that's a hard thing to do. It's a big learning gap and hard to scale that. And so we just looked over the ditch and saw that New Zealand had a lot of EVs, and the majority of them were imported from Japan and were a fraction of the cost. So we did the first one and then realized that we could just do, and we've run solar bulk buys in the past and thought that we could apply the same principles to that, and did an electric vehicle bulk buy in our local neighborhood, and had 24 EVs running around. And since then, we've been running that model all over the country. And this year, thanks to some support from Boundless Earth, Mike Cannon Brooks, we'll be doing 2,000 more this year.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
So probably flinging to you next. EV affordability is currently a big barrier to EV ownership. Cheapest one at the moment is probably 45k on the road. Then we have a tiny EV second-hand market, because EVs are still a new kid on the block. Some predict we might break the 40k barrier later this year, when they get released. This is the BYD Ocean and Seal models, perhaps. So what's your sort of feeling about EV affordability? Do you think they'll get cheaper over the years? Do you think is it better to wait?
Yeah.
Seen with the fuel economy and efficiency standards coming in the next few days to weeks, once they start bringing in the bonuses and penalties like there are for selling EVs and ICE cars in Europe, pretty much the floodgates might even open here. So what would you have to think about that?
I'd be dubious if the floodgates actually opened. I think that we're competing with the rest of the world who have very strong targets for electrifying their fleets, and they're still receiving penalties for every gram of CO2 that comes out of the tailpipes of the internal combustion engines that they sell, and they offset them with electric vehicles. And so I don't think that we're a prioritized market. We've had 9 years of inaction or actively suppressing the uptake of EVs. And so I really feel like we might get some uptick, but realistically, we're competing against the rest of the world. We're a small market at the end of the supply chain. So I hope that we will. But in terms of affordability, I think the secondhand imports are great, just because they've already paid off most of their carbon debt in the first few years of operating. And depending on how much you actually need to drive, the shorter battery range can be fine for the majority of your use. And with a vehicle that starts at $16,000, I think you can save a lot of money by just getting something that's a smaller capacity and be able to hire a longer range EV through many of the higher platforms out there. Hertz have a bunch of Polestars, EV. There's many options out there where you can actually save a lot of money and not have to get the bigger battery with the bigger amount of embodied energy. Hey kiddos, do you mind if we've got this thing on right now? Just sure, please, thank you.
I would have to back up with you on the smaller cars. I have actually an iMeave that I beetle around town in. It's actually been quite fun beetling around in that as my second car to the Kona that I own. So for most of the day-to-day drive stuff, it does a very good job. It's only when I head to Sydney or Perth that I actually need the Kona. Yeah,
that's right. And I think there's also other affordable options. At the moment, you can get a Polestar or a Tesla at around $45,000 through the novated leasing fringe benefit tax exemption. So that's a brilliant initiative that, if you're in a job where you can do the novated leasing, then it makes it a heck of a lot more affordable. And hopefully through that, we're going to see a lot more affordable EVs come in. There are some smaller ones like the Nissan Sakura or the Mitsubishi. They are making electric vehicles again. They've got the EKX. And so we've got a couple of them coming over as well, just to test it and see. Maybe we'll bring hundreds or thousands of them over here.
That'd be good to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll keep moving. I've only got an hour to do. Brief one to you all. Just do any of you still own an ICE car, internal combustion engine car? No, to Anthony. Yes, Anthony.
Lawnmower, and I'm
Yep,
hoping that'll be gone soon.
Yeah, my lawnmower is definitely electric now. Ralph, do you still own a petrol car?
Yes, we do own a Toyota Land Cruiser because my wife has 3 horses, and now and then she needs to pull a trailer, which with the horses is probably 2.2 tons. And I'd love to get my hands onto a Cybertruck, but I'm not sure that that's ever going to come to Australia. So yeah, we're waiting for a 4-wheel drive car that can tow that much, and electric.
That's still the big hole. And Kay, do you have one, or do you hire one for longer trips, or do you score a load of a longer range electric car each time?
All of the above. So yeah, my partner has a nice vehicle, sadly still, but we're looking to change that. And we do have an electric lawnmower. And when I go on long trips, I usually get another EV, like I did when I went up to fully charged in Sydney.
A quick one to you all again. This is a good one on charging. How do you charge at home? Is it the home charger or PowerPoint? I'll start with Ralph this time. You're at my top left there.
Yeah, like I said, probably 95% of our charging is done at home overnight. It's sort of an automatic thing now. When we park the car in the carport, we just plug it in, and it's scheduled to start charging at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night on off-peak electricity. We do have solar panels, but we do have the nice high feed-in tariff of 66 cents because of being an early adopter. That runs out, I think, September next year. So we will probably change our charging habits then. But at the moment, we just plug it in overnight, and every morning it's up to 80%, which is sort of the recommended level. Unless you do longer trips, then we change that to 100%.
Yep, yeah, I'll do the same. Do you use the Tesla charger or a power outlet?
Yeah, the Tesla charger. It came with the car. I think nowadays you need to buy it separately, but yeah, just the PowerPoint would probably not quite be fast enough for the 65 kilowatts that we have, I think.
And Kay, how do you charge yours? You've got a shorter range, smaller battery.
Very similar to Ralph. I charge it overnight because we've still got a great feed-in tariff until early next year.
So do I, till November next year.
Yeah, it's pretty sad when that finishes. But I only have a range of about 140 odd kilometres, so I can plug into a PowerPoint and it's virtually fully charged or nearly fully charged the next morning. So I always say it only takes me 10 to 15 seconds to charge my car.
Yes, that's a good line to use. It takes 20 seconds actually, 10 seconds to plug in, and then in the morning, 10 seconds to unplug. And Anthony, how do you charge cars when you got them at home?
Well, I don't get a great feed-in tariff, so I plug in during the day to make the most of it. That's the best way to utilize solar panels. So
yes,
yeah, plugging in at home the majority of the time. Very rarely use public charging.
Too true. Yes, the stats are it's about 80 to 90% of charging is done at home. So I always say 80 to 90% of petrol stations start better getting very nervous. Next question, I'll flick it through to who will I ask then? What times I think we've just covered that. What times you charge and why? If you've got a really good solar feed-in tariff, like 3 of us here, we charge at night for the off-peak, and Anthony, you charge during the day to get the best out of your solar. To all of you, have you ever been caught out between charging points? This is a good one. And how did you solve it if you did? I'll start with Kay this time.
I once got down to 2 kilometres trying to get to a place that was on the top of a hill. But luckily I got there and was able to charge overnight. But just in case, I always carry, if I'm going on longer distances, I always carry an extension cord and my home charger with me, because I know I can find a PowerPoint whenever I want to. And certainly it's so much easier and less stressful than thinking about where there's petrol stations if I was up low on petrol.
Yeah, I always say if you use your charger, the portable one that comes with the car, for your charging at home, it's always in some ways better to have a second charger and treat the one that came to the car as a spare tire that doesn't leave the car unless it's an emergency. Because the one day that you really needed that one that was left plugged into the garage when you've driven off and needed it is still sitting in the garage. and it's like leaving a spare tire behind. So I always say, if you're using a PowerPoint, generally worth having a spare one floating around, just for the sake of, you're obviously very good at putting it in the boot, but I imagine it's very easy to forget. And Anthony, have you ever been caught out?
Yeah, once bitten, twice shy. It really taught me a good lesson. But fortunately, when it did happen, RACT down here in Tasmania, they pulled out this dusty battery that had been sitting in the basement and came and gave a quick charge to the car as well. So that was quite amazing. It was just like bringing a jerry can to be able to get that little bit home.
And Ralph?
Yeah, in 3.5 years, we only had one experience. It's pretty difficult in a Tesla to actually run out of electricity, because it keeps warning you that you need to charge and you can't drive past the next charging station. But we ignored the warnings and thought we could outsmart the car, and came back from Adelaide. Instead of charging in Ballarat, which is a little detour, we went for Daylesford, and unfortunately the charger in Daylesford was not working. That was a bit of a disappointment. And then we had to keep on going to a tiny little Tesla destination charger, and we had to spend an hour late at night trickle charging, so we could get home. But in a Tesla, it's not bad, because we could watch a Netflix show on the screen. You know, it's sort of designed for entertaining you in the car.
Yes, too true. And yeah, I can admit to this one. I got a bit complacent when I was up at Fully Charged in Sydney, because I had a BP Pulse fast charger basically across the road from where I was staying. So naturally, when I drove across to do that charge, when I had about 50, 60 Ks left in my car, the entire network of BP Pulse in New South Wales was down. So I had just enough to get into the International Convention Centre where Fully Charged was, and literally squeaked in. I never knew there was a turtle mode in the Kona, but there's a little button, a little light that turns on when you've got 10 Ks left. I got in there comfortably. It was just, don't ever really want to do that again. That's probably only about the third time in 12 years of owning an EV that I've come close. Once or twice before that, I came in on turtle mode and the iMe once, and I misjudged it. It was 20 Ks back to Bunnings and back, rather than the 12 that I thought it was when I had 16 Ks left of range. You don't do it very often. I've probably done maybe 100,000 Ks in EVs. And as I always say, it's a lot easier, and as Kay said, it's a lot easier finding a PowerPoint than it is to find a petrol station jerry can and funnel. Okay, what else can we ask? Oh, yes, to each of you, if you're in the market to replace your EV, what would you replace it with maybe, or what features would you look for in a replacement? I'll start with Anthony. Although you've got the cheats version of you can just import one before you sell it to someone else.
What would I like to see? Well, we are bringing in a Rivian that'll still be in left-hand drive. It's just going to be for testing and evaluation. But I am pretty excited about it. I think it's going to be, if it suits all of our purposes, then we'll look at converting it over and trying to bring a lot more of them in. What would I like to see? More regen. I love the regen on more models of the cars. I think some of them only have a very light level of regen. I love that one pedal driving. I think that's a really brilliant, smart feature. That's my favorite thing about the EVs, actually. They're efficient. Yeah, it's clever.
Ralph, well, what would you?
We actually, I think I mentioned that before to you, Bryce. We bought this car to see us out. I mean, I'm not that old, but I truly believe that Tesla is going to run for 500,000 Ks. Many others have done that in the past. And it still feels new because of the frequent software updates. So we're intending to keep it for at least 20 years. And it does everything we want, apart from towing the trailer with the horses. So we're hoping to get a really powerful car at some stage, and that would probably be then replace our second car.
And Kay, you're probably coming towards looking at maybe another car in the not too distant future.
Yeah, look, I have to preface any comments by saying that the i3 has been fantastic. It's just been the best car for the last 8 years. But I did buy it with DC capabilities, DC charging capabilities, but unfortunately it had the wrong plug and CCS2 was settled on here. So I can't actually use the DC charging, even though I paid thousands of dollars for it. So that's really disappointing. And I don't really have the range to go very far. So, you know, I can get into the country Victoria, but that's as far as I can go. So I am looking at trying another car, and certainly the Ioniq showed me how far I can go on just one charge. I do like Anthony's comment about the regen. I think that's the best thing I've ever seen. I went up to Dalesford on one trip many years ago. It took a lot of battery to get there, but on the way back, it only took half as much, and I could just see the battery going up and up. It was just fantastic in terms of how much power energy was being put back into the battery as you're going down the hill.
I can remember driving down. I did my EV long weekend tour around Victoria in 2019, and I got to the top of Mount Hotham, and it was coming down again. I was a bit short on range, according to the range estimator at the top, and I had 50 k's more range than I needed. But by the time I got to the bottom, having had it set to the maximum regen, I love regen, so it makes a huge difference.
Renew is a non-profit membership organisation. Along with running Sustainable House Day, we also inform government policy, advocate for a fair energy transition, provide resources for climate disaster resilience, and publish 2 magazines. Sanctuary Magazine provides trusted independent information for people looking to build or renovate sustainably. Renew magazine is a leading voice on sustainable technology developments shaping the energy transition. These magazines grew from member newsletters in the 1980s and still maintain their grassroots independence and practical approach. Both are incredible resources, and subscribing is a great way to support us to transform Australian homes for climate and energy resilience.
So we've sort of got to the end of the question. Oh, I have one more question before we flick over to the audience. To finish up, name your top favourite advantage feature of driving an EV. I'll start off with mine. It's not having a detour and waste time at petrol stations. I come home, plug in, job done. Who would like to go first? Ralf?
Yeah, well, I think the main reason is that there's no fumes coming out of the back of the car. We're not burning oil. I saw one of the comments here that charging the car overnight defeats the purpose of having an electric car. I don't see it that way. I see it as using the grid as a form of battery. You know, we generate more electricity than we use from our solar panels. That's mainly the reason because we have a very efficient home, and we feed in the solar during the day and we take it out again at night. And we, in the 9 years that we've driven electric vehicles, I've just calculated it, we've saved 10,000 litres of petrol that we didn't burn compared to the car that we drove before that used 8.5 litres per 100 k's. So yeah, that's why we have an electric car, is so we don't burn petrol. And I totally agree. It's nice not having to go to a petrol station and be exposed to the fumes. And it's actually fun to drive. Yeah, I think those are the 3 reasons.
Quickly pop into that thing about charging off the grid isn't worth improving it. If you read the article that I write, I update every 5 years in Renew magazine, 2012, 2017, 2022. In every state of Australia, it is actually better to run an EV off the grid than to run a petrol car for the emissions. Even in Victoria, believe it or not, with our brown coal, it's about 5 or 6% better off, and it gets back down to 95% better in Tasmania, for instance. I forgot exactly which edition of Renew magazine it is, but it was mid last year, I think. So just sort of to pop that one, it's sort of an EV urban myth that keeps popping up and keeps sort of like a what was that, Caddyshack, the film, just keep popping up and hammer it again. Anthony, what's your favourite one favourite feature of an EV?
Well, I think it is that everybody's talking about as well, the efficiency of them. I mean, there's a reason why trains have electric motors, even though they're driven by big diesel generators, because of the efficiency of them. Even if you charge with a generator, you still get more power with that efficiency of the conversion of the electric motor to the wheels compared to just having an internal combustion putting out all that heat and noise. And my favorite thing is the lack of noise. I think it's amazing. People say that there's a worry for pedestrians, but that's okay because they make an artificially generated noise at low speed. Well, so many of my neighbors now have electric vehicles and it's so much quieter. You don't hear them starting their car at 6 o'clock in the morning to go off to work. It's just way better, way more livable. And also the main thing is those emissions. When we were at school drop off, people idling in their cars, that height that, PM 2.5 from diesel, and, that settles just around, knee height, the perfect height for all the kids to be breathing it in. So I can't wait until electric vehicles are just normal vehicles.
Yeah, one day we'll be calling them just cars, and they won't be called electric cars, and we'll calling them fossil cars and normal cars rather than electric cars and cars. And Kay, to you, what's your favourite?
There are so many advantages to an electric car. I would never ever go back, and I hate it when I have to drive a petrol car. But the main thing for me right at the start was that it's just such stress-free driving. And as Anthony was saying, there's no idling issues. You don't have to get concerned about the pollution and so forth. The car is really quiet, really fast, has fantastic handling, and I feel quite refreshed after a long drive, which I never do in a petrol car.
And now we can turn to the audience questions. We have lots, so apologies in advance that we're not going to make it through. Quick question from Gwen. What class is the BMW i3 Rex with range extender, FEV or BEV? It's an interesting one because it has it has basically a fairly large battery of like 200-ish kilometre range plus the extender. So it's in a netherworld of plug-in hybrid, but it'll be allowed past the post once they do the petrol vans on pure petrol cars being sold. But it is technically a plug-in hybrid, although it's effectively always a EV. Do you agree, Kay?
Yes, I think there's an action being taken by two people in Victoria against the road tax on EVs. And one of the people has got a FEV, a BMW FEV, just as was described, and the other person's got a BEV. So they are calling it a FEV.
And it's just so many questions. I'm just looking for side to side from Q&A and chat, so I might just pop across to the chat. There's a couple of people making the comments. I'll probably as a comment, and I always keep saying when you're buying a car, look at what you're buying and do you really need a big SUV, or do you need a little IMEV, or would even just a little cargo bicycle or electric public transport be the go? It's just people seem to keep jumping in and buying these big keep up with the Joneses car, which frustrates me. It's sort of my soapbox to everyone. Sort of think about what you might want, and if you can buy something smaller that suits, and maybe hire something to tow that once or twice a year, it just reduces your footprint all over. So it's probably a general comment. There's a number of comments coming in on that one. Anyone tell me the average cost of recharging a car at home? The average cost of recharging at one of the fast public stations. I might actually answer that myself because I've written some articles on it recently for the Driven. At public charging, it's probably a third to a half of petrol costs. And when it comes to home charging, quarter maybe if you're running off the grid, 1/6 to 1/8 if you're running off solar, and that's purely because of your 6 cents a kilowatt hour-ish for amortizing the cost of your panels over 20-25 years. So hopefully that answers that question. I'll quickly flick through to the right Q&As now. I'll go back through to them, and I've shot back too far, and I've got back to the panels quickly. Where are we? Advantages of running 3-phase into the house for charging and export of excess. Would someone like to pick up on that? Silence. Crickets. I can answer that one. Again, I've written articles for the Driven, so you can do a quick search on the Driven, say 3-phase car charging or home charging. If you've got 3-phase at home, you've won the car charging lottery. You can put a 3-phase charger in because it balances the load better. but there is no real need to put it three-phase at home. You can pretty much get between 8 and 11 hours of full charge using a single-phase charger. So then it just depends on what sort of charge you can install at home. In fact, I'm actually running a training course, the first training course for electricians tomorrow, on designing and installing electric car charging. So there will be more electricians out there soon that can actually give you design advice on how to set it up properly. Oh, here we go. Chris Barnes is asking the question: leaving an electric car unattended for 2 or 3 months, does this affect the battery? Can you add a smart charger to the car while you're away? Leaving an electric car in the heat of the day, does it also affect battery life? Ralf?
Well, we went away to Europe for 8 weeks last year, and we just left it plugged in. And the recommendation that I saw was to set the charging level to 50% of the battery, and it would top it up every night if it had to. So it's just plugged in at home, and it looks after itself. Bryce, what do you think? Was that a good idea to do?
Yes, that's fine. Generally speaking, if you're going away and you can't charge it, leave it between half to 2/3 charged. That's probably the best way to do it. And I have done that. I've sort of left the car sitting, like, because I've got 2 now, for a few months. The iMEV is quite happy to sit there, and it basically doesn't lose much at all. It's not like a lead acid battery, it'll go flat after a few months. The lithium batteries I've had sitting from conversions here for years, and they're still pretty close to where they were. A couple of questions from the Q&A again. EVs for rural off-grid home, doable, realistic? Anyone got some thoughts? Anthony?
So the bidirectional charger, unfortunately, that was certified for Australian use is no longer being produced by Wallbox Quasar. There are a number of other options, and if you are not connecting to the grid, it makes it a lot easier to be able to get a bidirectional charger. So there's some of the Nichicom ones, there's the Indra chargers, there's a number of bidirectional chargers which are available, which can actually work, and we've used in the past. So I think it's certainly something to get a qualified electrician to do. But if you are off grid, then utilizing, well, it's only the vehicles at the moment that have the Chattermost, the Nissan Leaf, and the Mitsubishi, the old iMEV, or even the Outlander with its very small battery. But that's pretty much the only option for doing bidirectional at the moment. There will be CCS2 coming before too long, and then it will be the vehicles that are enabled to have that functionality. So whether they have the firmware or hardware to be able to do that.
Yep, the CCS system will have, well, it's got vehicle to load now, which is the first layer where you can plug an adapter and get 240 volt AC out of it. The next 2 layers are vehicle to home, so you're feeding behind the meter, and then vehicle to grid with like the solar panels that they feed into the grid. And CCS will in fact have that available. The VW cars will start having that available later this year, early next year, and then the systems need to be designed and built to do that. And COAG here in Australia have said they'll get back together in 2025 and agree a standard. So there won't be vehicle to grid available, even if the cars can do it late this year, early next year, until 2025. So for anyone that's interested in that, if you want to do a Grid Connect car, hold your horses. It is coming, but it'll be 2025, maybe 26 before you can buy a reasonable price system.
I'll go down to South Australia.
Not entirely true. They have in ACT, it's a matter of you can only install them for trials, and you have to be a proper trial set up to do it. In South Australia, it's the same, but it's hand on heart. Yes, I'm doing a trial. Yes, they say you may install it. So they're a bit more lax, but it's still only trial systems in theory. And they're the only 2 states you can even install one connected to the grid. Off-grid, as Anthony, you pointed out, you can have them put in because they're an off-grid system.
If you are in South Australia as well, and you happen to have a Nissan Leaf, we're doing a partnership with Amber Energy as well, and they have one of those Wallbox Quasars that they'll be running a competition very soon to try and get somebody having one of those bidirectional chargers in their home and being able to use their energy retailer, which gives you access to the wholesale energy market, which is the best thing that you can possibly do if you've got batteries.
And there's a question back to vehicle to grid again. If budget is limited, how would someone choose between spending dollars on vehicle to grid EV? Because they are a lot more expensive than a home battery system or a home battery system. I think in short, economically, you would not install a home energy system at the moment. They're not cost viable. If you're out in outer metropolitan or regional areas where your power may not be as, reliable, there's probably a balance between reliability and cost there. And again, those systems won't be available for the general cars until 2-3 years' time. Anyone else care to? Sorry, I sort of dived in on the answer there.
I think there's also another consideration, whether there's another, whether you have a medical condition and you need to have equipment on all the time and have that backup, or if you're in an area which is susceptible to power outages, be it from fire or flood or storms or whatever, being able to back up your house. There's actually, different values that you could ascribe to those premiums that you get for safety and reliability.
Kit is asking the question, with new lithium batteries available, and as I know there's a number of aftermarket systems coming available, how easy, difficult and affordable is it to put better energy efficient batteries into older EVs? Who would like to pick that one up? Anthony, yours.
We've done a couple of battery replacements already, but the caveat is that we took them from vehicles that had like a side swipe across the car without any structural damage. So we used a secondhand battery and put it into the vehicle. It was incredibly easy. We had adult supervision. Obviously, it's very, very much, it has to be done by a qualified electrician or auto electrician. But it took us a couple of hours just figuring that out. Once that process is down, less than an hour to do the battery swap out. Being able to find the right batteries, that's actually something that we're working on through this next Boundless initiative, to start building out battery replacements so that we can upcycle the vehicles and refurbish them, keep them on the road for longer. And I think that possibility of being able to use those old batteries as stationary storage and extend the life out another 10 to 15 years, squeezing as much life as you possibly can out of it, buys us that time to scale so that we can start to then do the battery recycling in an efficient, cost-effective way and get the closed loop happening. I love it. It's really cool. And it's actually a means to be able to rehome manufacturing here in Australia. So we can, if we're going to dig it up, we may as well build it here as well. We may as well make it and, address our sovereign risk of being so reliant on imported fuel from volatile parts of the world. If we can just have our own, renewable power, and battery manufacturing here will be very well off.
And there's a couple of manufacturers. Oh, sorry, Kate.
Bryce, I was just going to add, the BMW designed the i3 so that you could pull out the battery of the first generation car and put in a new battery from a later generation car and extend the range by nearly double. So I thought that was pretty amazing. And I also was over in New Zealand a few years ago, and the New Zealanders, they pull out the battery pack and they just test which cells are a bit low and they replace those and then put the whole thing back again. And I thought that was a really good way and cost-effective way of looking after the battery system.
Yep, and there's also the guy up in Queensland who can do a new battery pack for a Mitsubishi i-MiEV that will double its original range. So it's 30 kilowatt hours instead of 16. And he's done quite a number of them now. And there's actually a group in Victoria for those down here that are they're doing that changeover as well. Let me have a quick look at what else is there. Well, EVs, I've done that for feedback. Ralf, you just answered one online. Longevity of batteries and what is the carbon footprint when you consider the whole life cycle of a car battery? I think I've written some stuff on this. Does anyone else like to pick up rather than me talk about it? We have.
Well, I found that, I've got an 8-year warranty on my battery and it just keeps going and going. And I think the warranty will run out first for sure. And I've spoken to so many people that have had their cars for 12, 14 years, their electric cars, and they're still on the original battery. So from that point of view, I think it's a real myth that they run out very quickly. The range reduces over time, of course, but the batteries still work.
Yeah, to give you some examples, my i-MiEV is 13 years old, to 2010. It's still got 70 k's range out of it. It's rough 110 to begin with. My Leaf that I used to have, some friends bought it. and it's still got about 70 out of its 130. They do want to put a new battery in it when that option comes up available later this year. And for life cycle purposes, in Europe, they've done an analysis where it's about 2 years to repay the carbon debt. In America, it's about 9 to 12 months, because it's actually about 18 months, sorry, in Europe, and about 9 to 12 in America, because of the distances are greater that they travel in America. So it's another one of those urban myths that the battery causes it to have more emissions overall than a petrol car. It's just simply not true. Julie would like to ask a question. Putting lots of chargers in public car parks where lots of vehicles are regularly parked during a day seems like a great complement to a grid with lots of solar. Why do you think there isn't a current focus on this? Anyone care to pick that one up? Ralf?
Yeah, I also saw questions about range anxiety, and I can totally understand where they come from. However, if most Australians do have off-street parking, I know if you don't have off-street parking, that can be an issue. But if you do have off-street parking, you'll be able to charge your car either at night or during the day, whenever you're at home. And for normal usage, you don't need to charge anywhere. So there's no need to charge at the supermarket or at the cinema or wherever you're driving. It's only, and I'm talking about a new generation electric vehicle that has 250, 300 Ks of range. We only need to charge somewhere when we drive to Sydney or Adelaide, which we've done several times. The car even plans the trip for you. You don't have to think about it. You just type in, I want to go to Sydney, and it will tell you, okay, first stop is at Echuca. You're going to get there with 15% in the battery. You stay there for 25 minutes and you'll get out of there with 80%. And then there's another 3 stops until you get to Sydney. So range anxiety is not part of my life. As I said, it only happened once where I ignored everything that the car told me. And yeah, we almost ran out of electricity, but I can understand it. I mean, if someone would not know anything about petrol cars and you would tell them, well, when you drive to a petrol station, there's 4 different types of petrol and you have to know what you fill in. And if you ever fill in diesel into a petrol car, you kill the car. That all sounds scary, but to us, that's normal. Why would you ever think of doing that? So electric cars are just something new and we just have to get used to it. We don't need chargers at every corner. That's all I wanted to say. Sorry.
That's right. There was a quick one about someone put in regen question mark. My apologies for using acronyms or abbreviations. Regen is regenerative braking. When you lift off your foot off the accelerator or push your foot on the brake, the motor turns into a generator and starts pumping power back into the battery. So you don't wear out the brakes. You actually put that energy that you would have otherwise wasted in the petrol car back into the battery. So that's what regen is. Here's a good question. What are the issues for a renter? Assuming a landlord won't pay for it, the renter would have to upgrade a switchboard, maybe install. I've got articles in Renew about these issues and have done some stuff on the Driven. So if we don't get an answer for you clean enough there or here, perhaps look up those there. Does anyone know any suggestions there? I have been part of a group that wrote some EV policy stuff for the ACT government on this area about the right to charge for renters and things. Anyone else know anything about this area and would like to comment on what renters can do if they can't get a charger put in? Is a PowerPoint enough? I can see nods.
Definitely. Yeah, when we stay somewhere at an Airbnb or whatever, we just use the PowerPoint. It's not a problem.
Yeah, I think the difficulty is if you're renting and you don't have off-street parking, being able to charge up at work, that's a great thing. If you're able to convince your work to be able to allow you to use a PowerPoint, then yeah, you can get most of your charge done there.
Yeah,
and depending on the size of your battery. Yeah.
I think there's not a lot of focus on what people can do, say, as someone mentioned before, in car parks, if there was charging in car parks or if there was charging in local shopping centres. So not the DC charging, the slower AC charging. and you're just there for a couple of hours, that would probably help people that don't have access to home charging. But at the moment, the focus seems to be on putting in DC chargers everywhere.
And it's so much more cost effective
chargers.
to do the AC, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it's just that grazing aspect is the behavior change that we can just, if you go shopping and you plug into an AC charger, you have more distance than when you arrived. You don't actually need to have fast chargers all over the place.
No, and it's not even good for the battery to fast charge all the time. So that's another advantage.
Yeah, we're coming close to time. I'm going to, Naomi had a question on cobalt mining and things. And I have written an article on the Driven if you'd care to look more on that one. And I'm going to write some more soon about some of the other minerals. I do make the point that all mining is bad for the environment unless it's done very carefully. So I do get a little grumpy sometimes when people say it's EV's fault for this. It's our Western economic lifestyle to some degree. But there's lots on that on the web at the moment. I think we might just come down to one more question. Is there anyone that Ralf, Kay, Anthony, that you've scrolled through that you've had a look at and would really like to answer? I'll give you one each and then we might have to wrap up.
Just from my experience, like someone was asking about how much it costs to charge cars, and you did answer that, Bryce. But I find with my car, it costs me $4 or $5 a night to charge the car. And when I charge that probably 2 or 3 times a week. And then I noticed that when I took the Ionic up to Sydney on the superfast charging, it cost $41 for to nearly fully charge the car, so to 400 kilometres. But normally on the not so fast DC chargers, it was costing about $25 to $30. So my i3, $4 or $5 to charge overnight to 140 Ks, and the Ionic 5, $30 to $45 to charge to 400 kilometres on a DC charger.
Okay, Ralf, do you have one in particular?
There's one question: how do EVs compare with combustion vehicles with mechanical problems other than battery issues? I wanted to point out that servicing costs are extremely low. Like the Teslas, for instance, don't even have a service manual. You don't need to come back ever unless something's wrong. And for instance, the brakes are being used a lot less in an EV than in a combustion engine, because most of the time you're braking with the electric motor. So I expect our brakes to last for as long as the car will last. In general, there's, I don't know, 200 plus less moving parts. There's no oil, there's no transmission. So a lot less things that can actually go wrong.
We'll have to. I'm sorry to have to cut you off there, and Anthony and I will have to avoid answering something because we've run out of time. Apologies. I had one that I was going to pick for my question, and Anthony, I'm sure you had one too. But that's about it for the time we have today. All huge thanks to our wonderful panelists, Ralf, I should say, Kay, Anthony. Stay with us for the last session of the day about lowering your energy bills through energy efficiency. And don't forget that joining Renew through Sustainable House Day, you go into the running to an electric scooter, thanks to Benzina. The fantastic prize is worth $5,000. Follow the link in the chat. I've also added a set of information source links at the start of the chat today. Good luck in your EV journey. Finally, we encourage you to make a donation. All today's events are free, but if everyone who attended just donated $10, it will go a long way to supporting Renew to transform Australia's homes for climate and energy resilience. Thank you very much yet again to Renew and the panelists today, and we'll see you again soon.